Hello everyone and welcome to What Culture. I'm Josh, joined as ever by Ewan Patterson for some delicious MCU news. Well, depending on how much you like the first Doctor Strange, because Doctor Strange 2, as we know, and the Multiverse of Madness, which is still the best title of all time, that is about to go into production in May, but now it doesn't have a director. Original director Scott Derrickson has removed himself from the project due to creative differences with Marvel, and we're just kind of going to talk through why this might have happened, because when this happens, you know, in the movie industry, it's always very cagey as to who pushed who out or who left for what reasons, but due to some interviews that from both Marvel and Scott in the past, we can kind of piece together why this split might have happened and why it's happened so late. Because for me, after Avengers Endgame, you know, Doctor Strange as a character is one of Marvel's biggest. The original movie made $680 million worldwide, I think, which is kind of crazy for a lot of money. An origin story like the first in the series. I'm sure that's more than Captain America and the like. So when you have retired, you know, your icons in the franchise like Iron Man and like Captain America, you need established characters to, you know, keep the brand afloat going forward, and Doctor Strange is one of the biggest. And in the past, Scott Derrickson was saying how he wanted the Multiverse of Madness to be more or less kind of a straight horror movie. His background is in horror, and he wanted to go down that route even further, and I think that's the biggest contention between him and Marvel. We don't know for sure, but based on what they've been saying, that seems to be the dividing point.
So the story broke yesterday over on Variety. You know, there was a statement that Marvel issued to them basically saying that, you know, we've parted over creative differences, we wish Scott all the best. And then Derrickson followed that up with a tweet basically saying, I wish Marvel all the best, I'm going to remain on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness as an executive producer, which is all fine and dandy, but yeah, he does mention creative differences, and as we all know, Marvel has a pretty iffy track record with creative issues and directors stepping away from projects because they feel creatively unfulfilled working on them. You know, we had Edgar Wright on Ant-Man, I think is one of the biggest example. Patty Jenkins left Thor: The Dark World, which went on to be a terrible film, and then she went and did Wonder Woman, which was like one of the best comic book movies of the last decade, so, you know, levels, and it's a bit of a frustrating thing that Derrickson has felt the need to step away at this point, and I think the big prevailing theory at this point is that maybe his idea for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was too scary for Marvel.
Well, that's it. When it was first announced, he was very out there on the front lines saying that this is going to be an absolutely wild movie. We're going to go full in on the horror aspects. It's going to be scary, it's going to be exciting, it's going to be like a great big blockbuster, unlike anything Marvel has done before, which sounds great, but at the same time, even then in the back of my head, I was thinking, but how far can he really push it? Because as good as Marvel movies are, a lot of the solo movies in particular follow at least some sort of formula. They are supposed to be these gigantic mass appeal movies to bring in as much money as possible, and that's totally fine, but I wonder how much, you know, leeway Scott Derrickson expected to have after creating that first movie, because to me this is very much similar to Edgar Wright. I think that's the closest kind of, you know, comparison. In the same way, Edgar Wright was associated with Ant-Man for so long before that movie went into production that you couldn't imagine him not making it, or you couldn't imagine Marvel making it without him, because the two were so interlinked. And that's kind of what I thought with Doctor Strange and Scott Derrickson. I thought because of how he helped get that character off the ground and become one of Marvel's most popular, that they would have wanted to keep him. They would have wanted to give him at least a bit more creative control, let him do more wackier things, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
Yes, so Kevin Feige actually said at the New York Film Academy in December, when queried on the status of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, you know, and I think relating to the Blade reboot that's coming in the future as well, whether Marvel were kind of setting their sights on horror movies going forward, and he kind of made an unnecessary contradiction which may actually, you know, intimate some of the creative differences behind the scenes. He basically said that, quote, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a horror film. It'll be a big MCU film with scary sequences in it, which is pretty much the easiest way to just turn people off this, unique prospect you had going forward, and basically just saying, it's just like the MCU, except there's going to be a little bit more of a spook to it, which is a frustrating thing. And I do wonder if Derrickson had some really interesting high concept ideas to include loads of really creepy, unsettling horror moments, and Feige looked at that and was like, I don't know about that one, Chief.
I'm not sure about this.
A zombie Iron Man in Spider-Man Far From Home, and I mean, that was pushing the boat out even for me. I couldn't sleep for 5 weeks after that. I imagine that's what Kevin Feige said.
I think that quote there is very illuminating, because he's kind of almost reassuring people that know this is going to be the MCU style of movie that you know and love. And yes, there are going to be differences in there, but I wonder, I mean, Kevin Feige obviously prioritizes the MCU as a brand and as a sort of, you know, aesthetic style and as a something familiar, that we all know what we're going to get when we go to an MCU movie. And it does sound like, you know, when it comes to this horror version of Doctor Strange, that was just going to differ too much. And I wonder what that means for the rest of the MCU going forward, because I felt like, for me, the MCU Phase 2 was very, very samey to the point of fault, but then 3 really opened it up. You had things like Thor Ragnarok, which was very much a Thor movie, but it was so much more comedy-inspired. Even something like Avengers Endgame had these massive consequences, had this massive tonal shift. It was darker, it was more sort of introspective. And Guardians 2, for me, was very much a James Gunn movie. They all felt distinct in a way that the phases hadn't before. And I wanted to see that kind of be built upon going forward.
Yeah, it's not a great start off the phase that was originally billed as being distinctly different. You know, if you're going to have different things, phase 3, like you said, very much came in with a distinct cosmic focus, and that was the big thing for Marvel around that time. I think phase 4 and then later phase 5, between those two announcements of Doctor Strange and Blade, we were thinking maybe they're going to introduce more supernatural elements to the proceedings, because Marvel, you know, not to the extent that DC does, but it certainly has a great range of supernatural material to pull from.
Definitely.
And I was kind of going into this phase thinking, oh, maybe we'll see more stuff like that. Maybe we'll get more Ghost Rider in the future. Maybe we'll get some more kind of, I know we've got a Moon Knight series coming, but there is all sorts of different things that they could do with here. And to see Doctor Strange in the future, I think maybe step away from that horror element is kind of really deeply disappointing to me, because I want to see Doctor Strange do some spooky stuff. That's kind of where the bread and butter of his comics are. Like, in the 80s, he fought a very weird kind of rip-off of Freddy Krueger in a comic. Like, this is...
I want to see that.
Yeah, exactly. And like Derrickson, as you say, he's very much a horror director. And I know a few eyebrows were raised when he was hired to do Doctor Strange, because he's a superhero. People don't necessarily associate the two genres, but Doctor Strange is, by definition, I would argue, a very kind of horror-style character. The supernatural stuff he delves into is very meta and sometimes occasionally terrifying. And to see Marvel step away from that is betraying the character somewhat.
It's funny that you mentioned that. You know, when you think of horror directors, you don't think of superhero movies. And yet, superhero movies right now are made up of people who have a background in horror. We've got James Wan doing Aquaman. We've got David F. Sandberg doing Shazam. We've got Muschietti doing Flash. We had Scott Derrickson doing Doctor Strange. And that is kind of cool, because you saw those horror influences come through in how set pieces were built and how tension was built. And it's a shame to lose that, because I wonder and I worry about who Marvel is going to get in, because production is still starting in May and it's coming out next May. So someone needs to be hired relatively quickly, and you just need to be plugged into whatever Marvel have already built.
Well, Josh, I have some great, amazing choices that could replace Scott Derrickson on. Oh wait, Guillermo del Toro, which the film wouldn't just get made.
No,
it wouldn't. It wouldn't get made. Tarantino might be. You know, he likes Doctor Strange.
I didn't know that Tarantino liked Doctor Strange.
Then
Maybe
again,
I'd forgotten.
It wouldn't get made.
No.
Jennifer Kent from The Babadook.
Very good, but
again, wouldn't get made. And maybe we could actually, you know, maybe let's just reanimate Wes Craven, right? We'll reanimate Wes Craven. We'll form like a circle. We'll get like a little. We'll have Ashton Cleary, and we'll just do like a little prayer circle.
Yeah.
And then we'll bring back Wes Craven. Then John Carpenter can do the score.
That would be awesome.
And then Lee Winnell can write, maybe?
I think it's probably less likely that either Guillermo del Toro or Jennifer Kent make that movie than that happening somehow, you know what I mean?
I agree. I mean, we're probably going to end up with Peyton Reed, aren't we?
I think we're going to end up with someone who's a very safe pair of hands. For me, I think it will be Peyton Reed, or maybe someone like a Taika Waititi, who, it's not that they don't have their own distinguishable styles, but I feel like they can come in this late in the day and be a very safe pair of hands and kind of like punch it up and get to the finish line. Because this movie, I think Marvel has a lot riding on it. I wonder whether they're a little bit, not worried, but certainly they must be expecting something of a step down in interest after Endgame tied off that phase and tied off some of the most beloved characters. And now we're going into this new phase that, you know, it's exciting to see them do something new and introduce new heroes who will carry the franchise going forward. But I wonder if there is a bit of trepidation on their behalf that they need these established characters to still hit and to still bring people in, so they can then support the, you know, the younger blood that they are wanting to build up.
Frustratingly, I do have that major anxiety that Marvel see Doctor Strange as another rich white superhero with facial hair who's a bit of an asshole who charms people, and that's basically their new flagship Iron Man. I really hope they aren't approaching this series with that mentality, because Doctor Strange is so much more than just a dude with facial hair. He's really cool and bizarre and weird and zany. If they ignore that element, then I'm going to be frustrated. Obviously, we could be reading into this way too much. You know, we don't know what's actually going to go ahead going forward. I just hope that Derrickson departing doesn't speak to a trend brand of Marvel still restricting creative vision. And I think a lot of people in the recent months as well have said maybe them hiring indie directors is a way of kind of getting and wriggling around that criticism. We have Chloe Zhao doing the Eternals next year as well, or this year rather. So yeah, I hope it's not going to spell doom for a more unique, distinctly different kind of Marvel, which was what was being built for Phase 4. Originally.
Exactly. I mean, I really hope this isn't, like you said, indicative of any kind of trend. It does really feel like an older Marvel move by, kind of restraining the creative vision or whatever, but it still might result in maybe a more cohesive film overall, or just still a really good one and a flagship for the next phase. But I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Are you a little bit gutted that Scott Derrickson has been fired, or did you not even like Doctor Strange? Are you looking forward to someone else taking the reins? Either way, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't know, I've been Josh. You can follow me on Twitter at JoshBoom with 2 O's. This has been Ewan. You can follow him on Twitter at
Ewan Ruins Things.
And we will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.